Haiti borders with the Dominican.
Her name is Serena Buffalino. They call her Mrs. B, and her class always begins with a pledge.
Something local, something global. Haiti.
They're words that carry weight here. Helping yourself means helping others, giving back, here and a world away in Haiti.
And nobody's helping them, except for people like us.
It was through her the class learned of Haiti, of the nearly 1 million orphans, many with no school, no support, no Mrs. B in their lives.
They could not wrap their head around that.
Mrs. B's students are among Toronto's most at risk. Their challenges vary from emotional and behavioral difficulties to learning disabilities. Their trauma so severe they can't function in a regular school setting, and we aren't allowed to show most of their classmates.
For most of the kids, most of society has turned them away. And in this classroom, they're accepted. They're accepted no matter what for who they are.
Take Yolanda. She came here last year so burdened and withdrawn, she would often fall silent, sometimes for days on end. It was, she says, Mrs. B's patience, her quiet encouragement, that saved her.
She actually saves people's lives from dangers.
And perhaps that's why these marginalized kids feel such a kinship with the orphans of Haiti, and why they were moved to act.
And so when Yolanda and Jackie and Patrick said, well, Miss B, we need to build them a school.
Build a school, no easy task. They started out raising money. They sold samosas, washed cars, screened movies, you name it. And in just a few months, this little class raised $20,000. So much, it's not just a one-room schoolhouse they can build, but a full 3-story school. And so Mrs. B set off on a journey she'd dreamed of, up into the dusty mountains above Port-au-Prince to a town called Canaan. It's home to thousands of earthquake refugees who live with no running water, no electricity, and no school, until now. The first step was a temporary school. It's up and running. 53 students already in uniform. The permanent school for 250 is growing from its foundations.
It makes me want to cry because she just makes me feel so awed, and I'm very proud of her.
All of this because of a handful of students back in Canada and Mrs. B, the teacher who believed in them.
These are for you.
At another fundraiser, a special tribute to the students, accepted by someone who without Mrs. B might not be here.
They believe in me and I believe in them, and together we not only change our lives, but we change the world around us.
For inspiring great things and seeing the potential in everyone, Serena Buffalino is this week's Everyday Hero.
This is the reason why I do what I do, is because of Yolanda and all the...
Good morning and good morning and good morning. I've been waiting for this day for a while. I know everybody's like, what are you talking about, Barbara? You about to understand what I'm talking about in less than 2 minutes. So today we have an awesome show already. It hasn't even started and I know it's going to be spectacular. Mr. Barry Mixon is starting his debut hourly show every Wednesday, starting at, well, really around 8, maybe 8:06, because, I got to come on and do my little tap dance. But that's okay, because I'm going to move out the way for greatness. I'm moving out the way for greatness. But before the greatness comes, I want everybody to really, 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 and I'm always talking about getting a pen and getting a piece of paper, to write notes down. And on a serious note, it's important. I always tell people it's one thing to get the knowledge. It's another thing to do something with that knowledge. So when Mr. Mixon comes on for his hour to teach you some awesome, awesome interesting stories that he has compared to the lessons learned from it, compared to getting the knowledge from it. Take note of that. Take note of that. Like I always say, our experts come on. They don't have to be here. I mean, there's a lot of stuff that I know a lot of people be doing, but they come here to this show, and I appreciate them to give you some motivation, some awareness, and some education. So take notes, sit back, get your favorite latte, coffee, tea, whatever you drink in the morning, water, whatever it is, and listen to this wonderful, the Gym Hunter and his show. But before we do that, we have to start the show correctly. So here we go. Yeah, I'm getting used to my drums. So I have turned both of my phones on silent. So I have no interruptions as this show is going on. I have got my piece of paper, my pad. I have got my pen. And I am ready, just like you, like I said earlier, to take these notes from this awesome, as you know, I know he says back and forth, I shouldn't say this, but the Jedi. And he is going to give us some wisdom and knowledge. And again, every Wednesday now, for 1 hour, you will get this spectacular Gym Hunter. So let's start Mr. Barry off right. Wait, is he there? Hey, Barry. I know he's like, I'm here. I'm here. So we will start him off right. Oh boy. Okay. My sponsor is telling me something. Give us 1 minute.
Good morning. Good morning. Good morning. Good morning. Bonjour. Bienvenue. I'm sorry. Niha. Hola. Bienvenue. Bienvenidos. And welcome to another episode of The Gem Hunter. My name is Barry Mixon, and I am a gemological storyteller. And each week on Wednesdays, now for 1 hour, I get the distinct honor and privilege of coming into your home, wherever that may be, and to take you on a journey, on an adventure into the art, science, history, and magic of gemstones, precious metals, and fine jewelry. It is a mission of mine, a promise that I made so long ago, to take something, to use the things that I've gone through in my life and to use it to help people discover the value of their own stories. And I believe that gemstones can do that on a mental, physical, and spiritual level. I'm actually kind of nervous because this is a dream. This is my inaugural episode of my, as Barbara said, 1 hour show. And those of you who speak for a living know that while 1 hour is hard enough, 1 hour on Zoom, 1 hour streaming is difficult because the things that go through your head, the stories that you want to tell. And I'm nervous not because I don't know whether I can talk for an hour, but more of just so much information. This is an important show to me because this is my 29th episode. Barbara and I have been together since the beginning. So this is my 29th episode. And when I was thinking back about where I am in my life, I realized that 29 years ago, I was homeless. And we talked about that. But the biggest thing that I tell people that I got out of that horrific experience is the whole concept of value. That's what this show is about. Week in, week out, this show is going to be about the different aspects of value. What does value mean? We talk about value all the time. Value going to the store. Is it a good value? Things like this. But as we know, there's lots of things that we don't value anymore. We live in a society that is extremely volatile. We change up things all the time. I remember when I bought my Samsung Note 10, and I remember thinking, wow, this is it. And I think I had the phone for maybe 2 weeks before the Note 11 and Note 12 comes out. So we don't understand value on a deeper level. We live in this society, in this world where people argue about everything. I mean, you could say something, you could say peanut butter. And someone would say, well, I don't really agree with peanut butter, or that so-and-so has peanut butter or something. But the one thing, despite all the things that we argue about, the one thing we don't argue about is jewelry. Gemstones. Gemstones have been with us from the beginning. From the absolute beginning of time. When, as a gemologist, the thing that excites me about, one of the many things that excites me about jewelry is the fact that gemstones have been through it all. From the very moment that man began, gemstones were in his life, his or her life. Gemstones are mythical structures. It's so much more than just something that you wear in your ear or your finger or your neck. Gemstones are magical things. And as I told you many, many times before, the reason why I got into gemstones or gemology wasn't because of the bling bling. I didn't grow up with a lot of jewelry. My mother didn't have a lot. She had some pieces, but she didn't have a lot. But as a result of my homelessness, as a result of me understanding what value is, that the universe, God, the force brought me to this moment. So this is a momentous moment for me in my life. Just to be here. This is a dream come true. 12 years ago, my good friend, Toastmaster friend Jerry Ayers was sitting in a restaurant in Chicago, and we talked about the gem hunter. And I told him, Jerry, what I want to do is talk about all the things that they don't talk about in jewelry stores or jewelry programs. So I want to start today, this inaugural episode is letting you know what the Gem Hunter is, what you will hopefully be watching each and every week. I'm not someone who knows everything there is to know about gemology. It's impossible. It's impossible. I know people like one of my mentors in appraisals, Heidi Harders, who's a woman here in Chicago, Illinois. Heidi knows jewelry so well. It's amazing. I'll never get to that point. Heidi, you could show Heidi a necklace or earring and be 20 feet away. And I'll say, Heidi, what is this? And she'll say, oh, Barry, that's a 1840. I mean, I'm like, oh my God. I'll never be a jewelry designer like my best friend and business partner, Cosette Barrett, who designs in her mind, who wakes up and calls me up 2-3 o'clock in the morning and said, Barry, I got an idea. Can you see it? And I'm like, no, I can't, because I don't think in those terms. I'm creative, but I don't think in those terms. So, but the one thing that fascinates me is the stories. I have, in the 18 years I've been studying this, I have gained so much peace and solace from understanding what gemstones are, what they mean. And not so much just the person, not just the gemstones itself. There's plenty of websites. If you want to listen to a website where you hear a guy get on there and say, emerald can be found so-and-so level and it's the molecular forces. There's plenty of websites and streaming services and shows talking about that. What I want to talk about is the stories that people have never heard before. The stories that changed the world. See, because gemstones were a part of all of that. Everything that has happened in human history has happened indirectly or directly because of gemstones. That's what, and there are so many different stories about gemstones. And I believe that those stories, that understanding of what value is, all the things that we can utilize within our own stories to understanding our value. Who we are, what are we made out of? Because I believe that if you look at gemstones, and not just emeralds, but any gemstone, if you look at gemstones, whether it be rubies, this is the symbol of my company, the Gem Hunter, gemological appraisals and storytelling services, art, science, history, magic. I use these gemstones, rubies, sapphires, citrine, emeralds, as a bridge. In the middle of this is a Celtic knot, the symbol of a Celtic knot for eternity, because all gemstones were considered healing devices, were considered gods, and that energy, that power went in every direction. That's why my ring and my pendant is designed like that. So to be able to 12 years later to sit here in front of you, to be able to tell you something that I've been thinking about for so long is a magnificent moment. When you study gemology, the first thing in terms of value, when you study appraising, how do you appraise gemstones and jewelry, personal property? The first thing they take you through is, of course, PP 201. This is the first course. And this is page 33. This is the beginning of what value is, and not just for personal property appraising, but for all appraisals, real estate and personal property. But because I study gemstones, it's just like art. It's personal property. And the first thing they tell you is the principles of progression and regression. The value of a property placed in the context of either higher or lesser valued property will increase or decrease respectively by the association. So when you understand what gemstones are, you understand that gemstones have not only people perceive gemstones as giving off power, and also the people who wear the gemstones, men and women throughout time, have utilized gemstones as a symbol of their power, as a symbol of what they are perceived to represent, and that representation is supposed to be matched by the love, by the dedication that that person says he has for that man or that woman. That's what gemstones do. Gemstones have been here before us and will be here after us. When you think about gemstones and precious metals, you have to understand, I'm fascinated by the fact that this is gold. This is my ring. In every piece of gold that you wear, every piece of gold that you have in your possession, you have to understand that that gold comes from space. Yeah. That gold was there in the beginning of time. Gold, platinum, silver are all heavy metals that were developed from the beginning of the universe. That's what we're wearing. And that gold traveled through the vast distance of space to find itself, to land on this planet that was first starting to be formed. And it, because it was heavy, it sunk down towards the core. So all the metal, gold, silver, platinum, all the metal that exists here on Earth comes from somewhere else. And that's fascinating to me. That these gemstones were here throughout all these. When you talk about the Civil War, the gemstones was there. When you talk about the French Revolution, there were gemstones that were involved. When you talk about the conquest of Europe, and you can't even talk about Africa and Asia and these continents without talking about gemstones. So the gem hunter is not going to be a show where I sit there and tell you, well, I know this, and all these things. No, what the gem hunter is going to be about is literally is going to be a show of discovery. You and I will discover this whole entire world. We through gemstones, we will discover why things are the way things are today, because many of the things that happen in today's world in the 21st century happened so long ago. And people don't know about it. People don't know about it. And for a while in the beginning, when I first started studying gemology, I was angry. I was angry because of what people do to get gemstones. What people do to acquire gemstones. And I didn't know what to do with that anger. I'm not going to sit here and tell you that you shouldn't wear gold and diamonds and rubies and emeralds. No, I can't sit here and tell you that, because we are genetically predisposed to like gemstones. You put a bright, pretty thing in front of a child, that child will react. That child will grab towards it and for it. But my mission each and every week is to show you how gemstones, not just their beauty, not just the concept of what a gemstone, the beautiful pendant of what this is. This is obviously a diamond, platinum, and emerald pendant that costs $50 million. $50 million. Because of the purity, because of what it means, because of what it represents. And so today, this is a continuation. Actually, this is going to be a two-part show because it's just too much information to take all in one time. But today, what we're going to talk about is emeralds. You cannot, if I'm going to start this whole new direction, we have to start from the beginning. And if we're going to start from the beginning, we have to talk about emeralds. Emeralds, basically aluminum, beryllium silicate. That's the chemical composition of what an emerald is. And when you understand the power of what emeralds are, you have to understand that emeralds were created through the motion, through the slamming together of two continents. Continents. When you think of an emerald, I want you to think, those of you who are born in May, those of you who emeralds is your birthstone. Those of you who, hi Diane, my good friend Diane Carr, her wedding anniversary, she's celebrating her 31st, her and her husband, Lewis, celebrating her 31st, their 31st wedding anniversary, which happens to be emerald. So they were married in May, and now they're celebrating their 31st wedding anniversary, which the gemstone that represents that is emerald. And so when you understand the power of emeralds, emeralds come from that force coming together, which creates aluminum beryllium silicate. See, as I said, gold, heavy metals come from space. And even the Incas knew this. I'm not talking about the people who live in Brazil or Peru now. I'm talking about the Incas, one of the first civilizations, understood this, because when the Spaniards came, they didn't care about the gold. They didn't care about the silver. They was like, take the gold, because they saw gold. They said gold was the sweat of sun and the stars, the sweat of the sun, the stars. But emeralds, they thought that emeralds were living beings. The light that comes from an emerald was, for them, was not just a light. It was the life force. It was the glow from a life force that lives within that stone. This is what the Incas felt about emeralds. So they said, take the gold, it's no problems. But they hid the emeralds. They hid the emeralds because they understood its power. So you can't talk about emeralds without understanding that emeralds have always been a stone of love. Barbara talks about love. We talk about chemo buddies, and we talk about Mrs. B. I want to meet Mrs. B one day, just because Mrs. B is talking about loving people who she don't know. The power of that. That's what emeralds represent. It is a stone of wealth and abundance. When in the Christian tradition, emeralds, which were one of the stones of the breastplate of Aaron, one of the 12 stones, that's what an emerald was. Emerald was proudly there because of what it represents. Emeralds represents an evolution, a transcendence of who you are and who you're going to be. Emeralds, as I said, has a hardness of 7.5 to 8. But the thing about emeralds is a brittle stone, meaning it can break. So those of you who have emeralds, lots of times emeralds can be found in what's called an emerald cut, which is a setting that gives protection for the emerald, especially on the outsides of the emerald. So an emerald doesn't break. It doesn't chip. We treasure emeralds. We pray to emeralds depending on the civilization, because we understand the power of that. And what we really understand is the power of the stories. An emerald is just a piece of rock. An emerald is that aluminum beryllium silicate, which just happens, just the rare circumstance that it has a drop of chromium in it, which gives it that color. So what you see is a change in color from a molecular level. And people, even before they understood science, they understood that. So today, we are going to talk about We're going to go back to the beginning. I'm going to show you today the relationship between gemstones and people. But first, let's go back. Let's go back to long time ago. I talked about, as far as the show, I talked about gem identification. I talked about one of the most important things you can do with a gemstone, understanding gemology, is understanding what that gemstone is. And I told you from the beginning of this show that my job is to show you the relationship between gemstones and people. So let's start with the gemology part of it. This is a dichroscope. This is called a London dichroscope. And what this dichroscope does, this little instrument, what this does is it shows you colors. Gemstones, like emeralds, there's three types of gemstones overall in regards to colors. There's gemstones that are isochromatic, isotopic, which means like a diamond. When you look at a diamond, the way diamond takes the light, the diamond will have a light, you shine a light on a diamond, and that light will slow down because it's changing the medium, it's changing what it travels through, but it goes down in a straight line. So something that is isotopic, basically that light will keep traveling through in a straight line. And there's gemstones like diamonds and spinel and garnet that does that. But there are other gemstones that change, not only slow down the speed of light, but they will change the direction. Some gemstones are what's called dichromatic too, dye. Those gemstones will literally take the light and split it into two different rays with two different colors. There's gemstones that are what's called trichronic, trichronic, which means it takes that single beam of light and splits it into three different rays. So what a dichroscope does is you put a gemstone underneath a dichroscope, having some type of light source to look at that gemstone. When you pass this dichroscope over a gemstone, you see not only the color that you see, but you see the color that's within inside of it. So when you look at a ruby, what you're looking at is you see red of a ruby. Everybody knows that rubies are red, but through a dichroscope, you see that a ruby also has a pink color. And that pink color, because it's so close to red on the visible spectrum, on the electromagnetic spectrum, it's so close that the eye can't differentiate between that red and see all the other colors. And my point to you is, what if we had a dichroscope for people? What if you could look at a person and say, oh my God, she or he is magnificent, beautiful, handsome, pretty. You look at that person, you see that person, and then with your dichroscope, you can pass over that person and see the other elements of what makes that person who that person is. Wouldn't that be amazing? I would have loved that in my marriages. I would have loved my wife. My second wife was absolutely gorgeous, truly a vision. I can still remember her and just go, I remember when I got married and she was standing at the end of the aisle. I remember literally looking up to God and saying, God, I am so good. You can just go on. I'm good. Because if I had a dichroscope, I would have seen the other aspects of her, the other things that make her who she is. So the person that we are, the reason why I bring that up is because of the person that we're going to talk about today. Because in my mind, nobody represents the things that I talk about on this show week after week better than Cleopatra. better than Cleopatra. The queen of the Egyptian empire. When we all grew up, and I'm 60 years old, so I grew up with Elizabeth Taylor and Richard Burton. When we grew up with that image of Cleopatra, the image that Hollywood gave us was that basically, and this is a family show, so you know what I'm saying, that she was a trollop. Saying it in a nice way. She was a trollop, that she used her sexual powers to get to where she wanted to get to. And what I'm saying to you today is that is so far from who she was. Yes, there was an aspect of her that was sensual and sexual, but that's not who she was. Cleopatra was by far one of the most amazing human beings that has ever walked the face of this earth. When you realize what she has done, the things that she was able to accomplish, you just sit there and, I'm actually sitting here ashamed of my years of education where I studied Napoleon and Alexander the Great and Julius Caesar. Cleopatra should be required reading. When Barbara talks about this is the diamond factor, and Barbara calls the women that come on her show Queen Diamonds, hopefully by the time this show is over, that Barbara will create a new category, which is called Queen Emeralds. Cleopatra, first of all, was born in Africa. So let's take care of that right off from the beginning. Cleopatra was a woman who was born in Africa. She was born in Egypt. So yes, did she have Greek lineage? Because her father, General Ptolemy, was the henchman of Alexander the Great. And when Alexander the Great died, he gave when they split up the empire, Alexander the Great gave Cleopatra's father, Ptolemy, control over, or he got control over Egypt. So Cleopatra was born in Alexandria, Egypt. So when people argue all the time whether she white, black, whether Elizabeth Taylor represented that. As far as I'm concerned, if you are born in Africa, then you are African. And we know the type of temperature and the sunlight that hits the people of Africa. So even if what I will say is, yes, I believe Cleopatra was a sister. But when I say a sister, I'm not just talking about a woman of color. I'm talking about a woman who lived in Africa, who, if she was white, she was certainly had a nice tan. People talk about Cleopatra and they talk negatively, saying that, she slept with a lot of people. And she did. I'm sorry. That she was very sensual. And she was. But you have to understand, if you're going to understand who Cleopatra was, Cleopatra did not look like this. I'm not talking about this in regards to just her physical, her ethnicity. I'm talking about this in terms of her beauty. Cleopatra actually was, I read a report just the other day, March 25th, that Cleopatra, the queen of ancient Egypt, was actually short, fat, and plain. And I say that because I want you to understand that this woman changed the history of the world. And she was just average looking. I looked her up. She was barely 5 feet tall. So she was short. Her bone structure showed that she was heavy, or at least plumped. And she wasn't that attractive. And you know this for real because her family, the way she came up in the Ptolemy Empire, everybody slept with their relatives. So, of course, when you have incest, when you sleep with your relatives, it changes the gene pool. So what I'm going to say to you is Cleopatra was awesome despite of her physical attributes, despite of who we are. So let me stop for a moment, pay some bills, allow our sponsors to speak, and I'll come back to this amazing woman. Okay, we're back. That was an amazing experience. I've never had a show where I had a commercial break. So, Barbara, thank you. Thank you for all our sponsors. So let's go back to Cleopatra. As I said, that we were told that Cleopatra was beautiful and she used her beauty to seduce, to intoxicate Julius Caesar and eventually Mark Antony to do the things that she did. But it was even more powerful than that, because as I said, Cleopatra was short, she was plump, and she was just average. She was plain. But when you read the books of Cleopatra, Cleopatra was extraordinarily educated. She knew math. She knew science. She studied medicine. She basically everything that men knew during those days, she knew all of it, and she knew that better than they did. I learned a word the other day studying that she was preternatural. And when I looked it up, it said that she had abilities far beyond anything that people could even comprehend. She knew who a person was just to be next to them, just to hear their voice, to hear their story was for Cleopatra to understand the way they think. This is who she was. In the Elizabeth Taylor version, she was just there. No, she evolved. She had to marry her brother because that was what tradition was back in those days. And she didn't like, obviously, marrying her younger brother, and he didn't like marrying her. So basically, they served as, once the father died, they served, the father bequeathed the power and wealth to the both of them, mostly to the brother, because he was male. At first, Cleopatra's brother was okay with that, because he was young. But as he grew up, like you see oftentimes in today's world, somebody started putting things in his head. You should be ruling by yourself, right? Why are you letting your sister take over? Why are you doing this? And the brother said, you know what? You're right. I should be in charge of this. The whole male thing. I should be in charge of this. So what he did was he exiled her. He exiled her. And what Cleopatra did is a symbol and representative of what women have done throughout time, what women are doing right now, those who are getting dressed, going to work. She put on her power suit. I have a friend, Crystal Waters, who talks about wearing her power suit of green. That's what Cleopatra did. Her brother exiled her to Syria, and she didn't let that stop her. What she did was she looked fantastic all the time, and she walked around and she used emeralds. She used emeralds as her symbol of power. Because if you understand, and that's where the link is. That's what the Gem Hunter is about. I am going to tell you each and every week stories that wrapped around that story. The thing that witnessed the story throughout time is gemstones. In this case, in the very beginning, we have emeralds. Emeralds, long before diamonds came around, emeralds was the ultimate power in the universe. If you had emeralds, you were like Bill Gates rich. You were Jeff Bezos rich. So what Cleopatra did was she wore emeralds, and people assumed because she wore something as magnificent and special as emeralds that she had to be rich. So not only did Cleopatra have these abilities as far as her education, as far as her trade, she spoke 9 different languages. In fact, the Ptolemy Empire lasted 300 years, and yet Cleopatra was the only person. Not only was she the last pharaoh of Egypt, but she was the only pharaoh in the whole history, 300 years, that actually spoke the Egyptian. But nobody knows about that. Nobody understands who this woman is. We just made her into a trollop and that's all she was. No. I think the thing that makes Cleopatra so spectacular as a person is because she used what she had. She used who she was to become who she became. And that's because she understood her value. Even though she was exiled to another country, she never ever stopped thinking that she was a queen. I told you in the beginning of the show that of the 7 elements of storytelling. And I told you that we talked about the once upon a time, we talked about sound, passion, the hero, the antagonist, which is the most important part of the story, awareness, transformation, and then sound again. Well, what Cleopatra embodied, she is the quintessential example of what awareness looks like. Awareness is that moment when you realize this is not something that I can do. This is something that I have to do. So Cleopatra knew that she was a queen. And because she carried herself as a queen, everybody around her, she transformed. Everybody around her. People saw her as a queen despite the fact that she wasn't in the capital of Egypt, Alexandria. We didn't know her value. We didn't know who she was. Cleopatra, let me tell you how cold Cleopatra was. We talk about we talk about Julius Caesar. We'll do this in 2 parts. We'll talk about Cleopatra, her relationship, Cleopatra from birth to her relationship with Julius Caesar. And then next week, we'll talk about Cleopatra from after Julius Caesar to Mark Antony. So let me tell you who Cleopatra was. Cleopatra basically used her abilities. And when her brother had an entire army, not just a few guys, had an entire army waiting to capture her, waiting to kill her, really, because that's what they did. That's what those people did in those days. The Ptolemies were, when you study her family, her lineage, they killed each other all the time. So Cleopatra's story is a story of survival. And one of the greatest things that she did to survive was the way she knew that her empire, Egypt, could not exist without the big bad gorilla in the room, which was Rome. And Julius Caesar was the baddest man on the planet at that time. And so when we see our depictions of Cleopatra wooing Julius Caesar, you have to understand that Cleopatra, again, it's easy if she was beautiful. It was easy if she was, looked like Rihanna or something like that. Would be easy. But Cleopatra was plain. So what her real power was inside. was inside of who she is. So what she did was she traveled down the Nile, an 8-day trip down the Nile through all her brother's enemy forces, his whole entire army. She traveled undetected down the Nile. She got to the city. She wrapped herself in a rug, because she, using her power, she knew the system. She knew how her brother worked. She knew everything, her move, all the brothers' moves. She knew it, and she wrapped herself in a rug, had her servants deliver this rug to Julius Caesar. Julius Caesar, and before I get into Julius Caesar, you talk about a freak. Julius Caesar was the ultimate player. Julius Caesar loved women and men. The thing about Julius Caesar was Julius Caesar not only loved women, but he literally would have relationships with men. And the things that people hate about Julius Caesar, some of them, was the fact that he would take women, but he would allow men to take him, which, of course, was not cool in those societies. See, back in those days, if you had more than one woman, it was cool, as long as you kept things on the DL. The down low. Julius Caesar was known for just taking people's wives and their daughters and their sisters. If your sister was attractive in any kind of way and Julius Caesar wanted it, he would just like, I'm borrowing your sister. And you're like, what? I'm borrowing your wife. What? And you knew. Baby, you got to go sleep with the Julius Caesar. What? Yeah, that's what you got to do. So think about, here is this plain Jane woman, going to Cleopatra, and she went down the aisle. She went down the Nile and presented herself to the ultimate player. Julius Caesar was so out there that he would make Jeffrey Epstein blush. Jeffrey Epstein would have been saying, what? You can't do nothing like that. That's who Julius Caesar was. And she had herself delivered to Julius Caesar. She had her servants open up the carpet, and ta-da, she presented herself. Voila. And it's not just because of the way she looked. Julius Caesar was impressed by the simple fact that she was rich. She owned an emerald mine. That's where the connection is. Julius Caesar, Cleopatra's true power came from emeralds, came from understanding the power of what this gemstone is. So what she used was that. And when Julius Caesar saw who she was, he changed. He changed into another man. He literally went back to Rome, even though he was married, and changed the whole society. And people started mimicking who she was because of her story, because she transformed everybody around her. That is who Cleopatra was. So next week, we are going to continue this wonderful journey of Cleopatra and the relationship that she had with emeralds. But until then, I want you to take a look at yourself. Look in the mirror, look at your partner, look at the people that you love, and take a moment to discover the value of your story and who they are. Au revoir.
I'm hanging on your every word, the love inside, I feel it burn. I've never felt this way before. I've had a taste, now I want more. So here we are, just you and me. I'm overwhelmed when you touch me. You talk so sweet, I hear the sound, 'cause when you do, my feet won't touch the ground.
oh. You will not believe this, listeners. Everybody that has been the first day Mr. Gem Hunter did his hour show. I've been sitting there literally, I've been getting texts. I got some phone calls. I'm like, look, you're gonna have to call me later. Oh my God, he's awesome. I know he's awesome. I know he's amazing. Can I see what he's talking about? Oh my God, I'm just so like, I can't. You know what? Usually, some people say, Barbara, you never have like this. I don't know what to say moment, but I do have that. Don't know what to say moment right now because I'm sitting there like, okay, wait a minute, you blowing my Texas up here. They said you should have done this a long time ago. He needed to be on me. I know. That's why he's on right now for an hour. So, I just have to say, all I'm going to say is this. Thank you, Master. Master Barry. Thank you so much. Oh, I almost feel like I need to just go in like in a sitting position on the floor and just be like, I'm telling you, he is, this. I'm like, I don't even know what to say. Okay, on a serious note though, yes, every Wednesday, you have to be right here. So everybody that was calling me and stuff, I want to tell you, don't call me between the hours, you heard that in a movie, between the hours of 8 o'clock and 9 o'clock Central Time on Wednesday, because I need to be more focused on Barry. But I'm going to go back, see, this one thing about what's so nice about this, after we end the show, this will always be on replay all the time for you to see. You can come back tomorrow. You can go back Friday. You can take more notes because I know some of you probably didn't take the notes you're supposed to take. I'm just being honest. Let's put it out there because you probably was so engulfed like, my God, this is awesome. And then calling me. So with that, I really need you to concentrate on that. He is going to be he's going to be bringing in a lot of information. And just remember, with the stories that he's bringing out regarding the gems and the history, because he's giving you see, this is the thing that I'm loving. He's giving you history about the gems and then going back to you. So you see how this thing is just like entwining into, get the message here. That's what I'm talking about. Get the message. And I'm thinking to myself, I need to call, if they were still alive, my history teacher and say, mm-mm. Mm-mm. You messed up. I worked too hard for that grade, and it wasn't because you were teaching me right. It was because I know I needed it and I had to put some extra to it. But if you would have been just a little ounce, just a little bitty ounce like Barry, maybe I would have enjoyed it better and that A would have been more smooth than more difficult. So with that said, I mean, I could just say over and over again. I know everybody's like, but see, when you get something that's exciting, that helps, it helps you grow, you get excited. You get excited. So I want you to get excited about it. Come back next Wednesday. Now, okay, I got to kind of push back a little bit. I do have other shows during the week, but we will be back tomorrow. We're going to have Miss Laura come on. She moved from Wednesday, so Barry can be the awesome person he is on Wednesday for his hour, but she's coming on tomorrow. And then I have a special guest that I'm going to be interviewing tomorrow as well. So I really want you to come back. Same time, same station, the Diamond Factor Experience show with Barbara Beckley and experts and friends and special guests. I always like to add that little extra because it wouldn't be a show unless I didn't have my experts like Barry and everybody else. And then my special guests that I come on sometimes and panel guests. So with that, I'm going to end it. And I want you just to really just, let this stuff sink in. Let it sink in. Because, I mean, next week you got to be ready. And reminder, do not call me again between the hours of 8 and 9 on Wednesday, please. I'm trying to focus with that. So, as I always say, remember your purpose. Remember your purpose. Remember your passion. Remember your drive. That's what I call your PPD, your foundation in life. When you know that, when you own it, when you really, really understand, like Barry said, your value and what you're doing in your life, I put it all in a bow, and I call it the Diamond Factor. So remember that it's not only important in your life to understand what you do, but it's also important because your genius, your gifts that come out from that helps the world, helps the universe, and we help each other. So with that, we'll see you Thursday morning. Bye.